Hey, this is Corey Marshall, and you are listening to Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast.
The Kasanova Podcast, the #1 podcast in Hawaii, is brought to you by these contributors on Patreon. If you'd like to see more content like this more often, as well as more podcast reviews, impressions, early access releases, live streams, and original content, then consider becoming a patron today. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mekel Kasanova. I'm coming at you with another phenomenal interview. In today's episode, I've got the true honor and privilege of having an icon and a legend in the one, the only, Adam Koralik. Now, Adam is a legend when it comes to YouTube. He's been in the game for over 10 years, making videos about video games, how to do repairs. He's got a podcast called the Figure It Out Podcast. He's done various interviews. He's been all over the world. The man is constantly traveling and so much more. He even got to be part of the promotions for the Shenmue 1 and 2 HD collection, as well as Shenmue 3. So it's super phenomenal being able to have an icon such as himself on the podcast. So if you're ready to do it, I'm ready to do it. Let's go ahead and welcome Adam onto the show. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Miguela Kasanova, and I've got the true honor and privilege of having an icon and a legend on the show, the one, the only, Adam Koralik. Adam,
no, he had an actual icon and legend, but he had to bail, so he had to settle for me. But thank you for letting me be the consolation prize.
Oh man, how's it going, man? How you doing? And thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem. I'm always honored to replace Adam Sandler. It's fine. That's what he thought he was getting. Everybody, all Adams are the same.
Oh man, and the funny thing is too, like, this is the first podcast I've recorded in almost 2 months. Like, so I'm nervous.
So I'm a big letdown. I'm sorry, but that was why out of the gate you should have kept Sandler. I'm sorry. He's doing well with that movie he's got out right now. I see ads for it everywhere.
True, it's seriously everywhere. Like, everywhere I turn, I'm like, boom. Like, if I'm on YouTube, boom, there's every 5 minutes there's an ad on a video. I'm like, oh, okay, Adam Sandler, he's still going.
Yeah, so there you go. Everybody go see Adam Sandler's new movie. I'm just filling in for him. That's what this is all about.
Him and Tom Cruise too. I'm shocked Tom Cruise is still going. All right, man. So go ahead and plug your social media, any upcoming projects.
Sure. What am I actually? All right, so I am a YouTuber. I've been around for a little over a decade now. I do a lot with video games. My primary channel is called Adam Koralik. It's just my name, where I do a lot of discussions about the history of video games, repairing video game consoles, stuff like that, and the state of the industry. I used to work on a bunch of other channels, such as Game Society Pimps, Blame Society Films. I worked on Machinima at their peak. I've been doing stuff in the games industry for a long time now. And I'm just overall, I guess the easiest way to sum it up is I am a YouTuber.
Nice, man. Nice. And how has that journey been so far? Like, dude, like a little over a decade. That's
dude, I fell into it, man. Like so I went to Columbia College, Chicago, with the intent of like, hey, I'm going to be a filmmaker. That's what I'm going to do. Right. And I was doing that. I was making short films, all that stuff you do in college. And they came to a point where I was like, okay, I want to put all this stuff up on YouTube because I want to give it a platform, because I was making the mistake of like, I'll make these films and I will put them in film festivals. But the problem with film festivals is even if you get in, you get like 100 people at best to watch it. And so there was this new thing called YouTube where you could put stuff up and people would like watch it. So I was like, why don't I do that? But then I was like, well, I don't want to, put all this effort into these films with no following and then put them out there and have nobody see them. So I was like, I just need to make more content. So I started being like, well, what else can I talk about or do? It's like, oh, I have a lot of video game stuff. I like video games. Why don't I talk about that? And eventually that just kind of gobbled up the entire thing. And fast forward 10 years, somehow I have a career built around, going to events and, being on YouTube and I guess what you call an influencer. And it was really never the plan. I guess I just kind of failed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like, isn't it amazing, when you talk to some people, they still don't understand exactly what it is that we do. Like this being, being an influencer, being a YouTuber, or content creator, it's still a new, kind of a new niche, a new field. And a lot of people are just not familiar with it. Like they don't, like I get people all the time. They're like, what exactly is it that you do? And I'm like, well, you see,
it's borderline impossible to explain to people. And so my mom just tells people I'm like a lawyer or something because she doesn't know like what to say to people because I can't even properly explain it. Like she knows the word influencer, but what does that really mean? Nobody really knows unless you're actually doing that. Then you get it.
Right. And it's the thing about it too is like when you get to work with the gaming industry and get to work with tech companies and various people, like it's so super surreal. Like, when you meet the people that you kind of grew up like listening to or fans of their work and you meet them, you're like, holy shit, I'm actually doing this. And like a lot of people don't understand how surreal that is.
Yeah, believe me, I completely get it. And that's like, it's funny. My cousin actually told me never tell her kids what I do because she doesn't want them to think that's attainable. Because when you think about it, what our job is something a 12-year-old would invent.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to play video games and make videos and be famous and I'll get money for that. It's like, that's not a job. That's dumb luck. Like I said, we just fell into that.
Yeah.
And, you can't let little kids think that's possible.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. Like you get people saying like, oh, it's not a job, it's not a career. But I'm like, I file taxes just like you do. So
same. As much as I'm making fun of it and making fun of myself, it is a hell of a lot of work for anybody out there. It's not all just like, rainbows and smiles. There's a ton of stuff that goes into it. Yeah. Is it cool? Yes, it definitely has its benefits, but it also has many, many downsides, as I'm sure you know. Yeah. The stress, the amount of work. Keeps you busy.
Dude, and so many people think like it's not a job in the sense of like I've gotten people say, oh, all you do is sit, you just sit on your ass and you play video games all day, or you just go into iMovie and slap things together. I'm like, if you saw the back end of what we have to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's they just want to eat the burger and they don't want to meet the cow. That's basically what's happening there. It's like every other job. You only see the end result of it as opposed to the entire process, the manufacturing of how it got made. It's true. You and I aren't like sitting around building buildings or anything, but we're building entertainment, and that does take time and effort.
Yeah, it definitely does. And especially like when it comes to like, because you're a podcaster as well. And like having to transition from like doing YouTube videos and content creation to doing podcasting. And I'm noticing a lot of people now are hopping into podcasts. It's an entirely different world than YouTube. And a lot of people think, oh, I can just do the same thing I do with my YouTube videos. Like, no, you have to do more.
Yeah. And you have to deal with technical nightmares, and it's many, many issues. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but at least you achieved being the #1 podcast of an entire state. Good on you.
Dude, okay, dude. There's the story behind that. Okay, so let's hop in the DeLorean. We'll go back about a couple years, and the funny thing is, when I started doing podcasting, I started off with a former friend of mine, one of the best men at my wedding, and his whole thing was like, he's like, yeah, man, I want to do a podcast. I want to do stuff like was it the Windows Central podcast, and he wanted to talk about, because we both used to work for Microsoft. So he's like, we're going to talk about, Windows computers, Apple computers, going to talk about gaming. We're going to do this. And so I was like, okay, fine. And he's like, yeah, you got to get some equipment. You need to get a Yeti. You need to get, Go XLR and get all this stuff. So I bought all that. And the only time he ever wanted to record was when he wanted to, and at my house, not at his. And so we did, I think this is like 2016, 2017. We did probably like 15 episodes before we ended up falling out because he put everything on me to like promote it, produce it, edit it, everything. And so I got sick of it. And then when we fell out, I was like, okay, I got all this equipment. I might as well do something on my own. So then I started producing and my own show, which originally it was Kasanova Speaks. And then I just went from there to like, okay, so I'm tired of ranting. I'm tired of just talking about video games and tech. Let me, get some of these content creators I enjoy. So I started with, smaller content creators, and then I gradually went up to bigger ones. And now it's like, you know what? Okay, I'm kind of tired of just talking to content creators, because not to throw shade on some, but there have been some that I have dealt with, and their whole thing was, I'll only come on your channel when you get X amount of subs. So I was like, all right, well, fuck you too then. Let me go. Is
that what happened with Sandler? Is that why you had to settle for me? Exactly. It makes sense. It makes sense. That's cool.
So I transitioned over to, I was like, okay, so what else can I do? So then I forget, I think it was Shining Resonance, the Sega game that came out in 2017. So I was like, okay, let me just reach out to some voice actors. So the guy who is the main character and the lady who's the main female lead, I reached out to them on Twitter, and then they're like, yeah, we'll come on. I was like, holy shit, this is real. All right. So I interviewed them, and the lead character lady, Dorothy Fawn from Running Kenshin, and from, what else was she in? She was in Trigun. So I interviewed her, and then that opened up so many doors, because she started telling me, she's like, yeah, I was on this podcast with this guy in Hawaii, and it was really, really good. And then that, led me to interviewing like Richard Epcar, and then, Ruben Langdon, and it just started going from there. And I'm like, okay, I think I kind of carved a new niche. And so I just kept going with that. And then I looked at the podcast charts out here in Hawaii, and admittedly, there's probably like 17 podcasts out here. But then for like 2 years in a row, I'm number one. I'm like, wow, people are actually listening. All right, then.
I'm gonna expand it for you. You're not only the biggest in Hawaii, you're probably the biggest in all of Pacific America. I'll give you Guam. I'll give you the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. That's all you.
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it. I really wouldn't doubt it. But it's crazy. And I've had some people, like, there's some people out here in Hawaii that actually hate the fact that they're like, oh, you're so egotistical saying you're number one. I'm like, well, that's the stats. The stats say it. I'm using it as a marketing tool too. So,
well, congratulations on your success, my friend.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And then, having a legend and icon like yourself on here.
Again, I'm not Sandler, dude. I can do a Sandler impression. Hippity dippity, I'm on your podcast. But that's the best you're gonna get. Like, I can't do anything beyond that.
But yeah, man, it's been a crazy ride, man. I really enjoy it. There was some time, like, the reason, like, this is the first one I've recorded in like 2 months, is I had to take some time off, because I don't think people understand, like, when you're trying to get guests on, when you're adjusting volume levels, and you're going through and making sure you get rid of all the excess sounds in your podcast, on top of doing YouTube videos, on top of streaming and other content creation. It's tiring. And sometimes you just like, sometimes you got to take a break. And I had to take a 2-month break because I burnt out.
That's kind of what I'm doing mostly in January this month, is just kind of taking it off, because January is like dead time on YouTube.
Yeah.
So this is kind of fun, because it's kind of forcing me to get back in the swing of things a little bit. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course, man, of course. And that's one of the other things I want to talk about, is like, I definitely want to go into like your history with gaming, but let's talk about actually, let's go ahead and go into that. So what got you into gaming? Like, what was your first gaming memory, and what just hooked you?
Oh, like as a kid?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first time I ever saw a video game, I was over at my cousin's house. I was probably like Thanksgiving of like 91. Mm-hmm. And I remember like being there, and they had just gotten a Super Nintendo. And they're sitting there playing it. They're playing Super Mario World, and they're playing the absolute first level of the game. Mm-hmm. And none of them can get through the first level, but I'm just so fascinated by this thing. And at one point they just hand me the controller. Now I like die immediately, and I cry and shit my pants because I'm a little kid and I don't know what I'm doing. But you know, that like fascinated me. I just kept playing this, never got past that, literally the first like Goomba or turtle or whatever the thing is that comes right up, but turtle. But yeah, so, but like, I was like, holy crap. But I remember that was one of my first memories of like where I booted up and I have a brain now and I'm aware of my surroundings is that particular moment. And so for years it was like, hey mom, I want, you know, video games. Like my cousins have video games. My friends have video games. I want video games. And then so 93 comes around and I'm constantly pressing around this. Come on, hook me up with something. And I'm thinking, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, something. And she pulls out this like old Atari 2600 and gives it to me. And she's just like, yeah, here you go. They're all the same. One's as good as another. Which it wasn't. It was good. I enjoyed my Space Invaders, but as I've said many times in videos, like you can't go out to the playground with everybody talking about Donkey Kong and Sonic the Hedgehog, and you're like, Pac-Man, what up? And nobody can relate. And so that Christmas, though, Christmas 93, she hooked me up with the Genesis, and that was just like, it was off to the races from there. And, you know, even she will admit this, that it was probably her fault that my career ended up revolving around video games because she didn't want me to have anything to do with them. I call it like the rubber band effect. You know, you pulled back on that for so long that by the time you released it, it just had too much power and it was unstoppable.
Right. You know, that's the other thing too, is I don't think a lot of people from this generation now, you know, the kids born in 2000 or, you know, after 2000, I don't think they understand, like when they talk about, oh, the console wars of the Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. No, if you didn't grow up in the 90s, you don't know what a console war was, because there was you had Super Nintendo, you had Sega Genesis, you had
you had a lot.
God. and nothing really lasted for very long aside from Sega, Nintendo, and Sony.
Yeah, pretty much. It was a completely insane time where all these different companies, you know, just tried their hat in the ring to like make a console. My basic, you know, I've always believed that what happened there is when you look at all the console generations, after the video game crash, only really Nintendo and to a lesser extent Sega were willing to try. Atari a little bit, you know, they had NES, they had Sega Master System, they had the Atari 7800, but there wasn't much else until Nintendo blew it up and it was like huge. And all these people thought, okay, we can try something. And a bunch of them tried with the 4th gen, but really only, again, Sega and Nintendo prevailed. But Sega did so well with the Genesis that everyone realized in the 5th gen, hey, you know what? You don't have to be Nintendo, because there was this belief that only Nintendo could be successful with video games. Sega proved that wasn't true. So then you had all these companies making tons and tons of consoles that were very short-lived. The idea would be somebody else that isn't Nintendo can do this, and eventually that proved to be true. It was Sony. They were successful at that. But you know, while we think about them, we forget about the ash heap of history of things like the FM Towns Marty and the Commodore Amiga CD32 and the Atari Jaguar and so on and so forth. But it was a war, man. We got a Cold War now, but we had a war back then.
Right, we really did. And it's like, it's funny when I hear people tell me now, they're like, man, I prefer playing games on PlayStation because it's so much better than Xbox or so much better than Nintendo on the Switch. And I'm like, it's the same game with minor or sometimes half a major difference between them. It's not like back in the day when you picked up Aladdin on the Sega Genesis or you picked it up on Super Nintendo. Same name, different game.
Completely true. It was actually quite rare to find two games that were the same on both platforms. It was largely because of Nintendo having like such a grip on developers. But so that forced Sega to be creative and like make their own stuff in-house with the same licensing. And it basically back then, the only way Sega or Nintendo or NEC in the case of PC Engine / TurboGrafx-16 could pull ahead was if they made a really good game that was simply better than their competitions. There was no side incentives, no Blu-ray playback, no Netflix support, no streaming capability, none of that stuff. That's just like the icing on the cake now. It was all about which one has the better games, that one or that one. And that's what made it so fascinating.
Yeah. You know, and you said back in '93, you said your mom got you a Sega Genesis. Like, let's go, man. Let's step in the DeLorean. Like from '93 to 2000. Like, did you just stay as a Sega kid, or did it just open the door? You're like, okay, I need to play this. I need that. I need this. Like,
not really. So like, I was very, very much on Team Genesis there for a couple of years. And I was very aware of the PS1 and the N64 when they came about. I remember going to, again, was one of my cousin's house, and they had just gotten the PlayStation, the first one, probably 95 or early 96. And I remember seeing this thing for the first time being like, what the hell is that? That's not Nintendo. That's not Sega. Sony? The guys on that television, the guys who made that TV made a game console. And I remember being fascinated by Twisted Metal. And I was just like, oh, this is really cool. Maybe this is the future. And then, later at that point in time, the N64 came out and you're seeing Super Mario 64. And it's just like this giant leap over the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. The thing is, I don't know what it was like for you growing up, but here in Chicago, like I never saw Sega Saturn stuff ever, anywhere. It was a ghost. I was aware of the 32X only because I actually had a friend who bought one when it was relevant for that 3 weeks that it was available. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but I never knew anybody who had a Sega TV. But with the Saturn, it was just, I did not hear about Saturn until well after it was over. So when you ask me if I stuck with Sega, the answer is no, but not because I didn't want to. It was because I was unaware of their continued existence. And it really wasn't until the Dreamcast came about where it was like, oh man, Sega's back. Because in like from the perspective of whatever I was at the time, maybe 9 years old, it was like Sega just went away. It wasn't that they had made a console that I missed. They just didn't exist for a few years. And when they announced Dreamcast, I was like, oh, the guys who made Genesis, who were like the biggest piece of my childhood, are back now. And so I was super on board with that. I mean, even when you go back and look at some of that early Dreamcast promotional material where they're like, do you remember those It's Thinking commercials where they go inside the Dreamcast? Yeah. I mean, there's references, like there's one for whatever it was, NFL 2K, where they're talking about, like the graphics and how great they are. And he's like, well, but back in my day, in the Genesis days, it looked like it. They never referenced the Saturn. It was like they were completely ashamed that it ever happened. So even in their own materials, it's like, I didn't know they had a previous console.
Yeah. No, so when I was growing up, like between, because I'm originally from Western Samoa. So I went from Western Samoa to Memphis, Tennessee, where my dad's from, when he got stationed there. And when I was growing up there, we saw Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and then it went to PlayStation 1 and N64. And to a lesser extent, the 3DO and the Jaguar. Other than that, Sega Saturn, like even when we went to like KB Toys or Toys R Us or Babbage's or anything like that, it was rare like to see anything with like the Saturn. I think the most exposure I ever had to the Saturn was like Game Pro or Electronic, EGM magazine or something like that. Like I don't remember ever seeing or even knowing anyone that had it, like just like you, like until it was over. And I was like, oh, like I remember reading something like, oh yeah, there's Burning Rangers, there's Virtualon, and I'm like, where was I for this? And it was just, I don't know, like well, to be more correct, Sega of America really didn't have any faith in the Saturn.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, Tom Kalinske, I think, he was interviewed. He was a former president of Sega of America, and he basically wrote a book all about this, like just about how badly mishandled Sega was right after the Genesis and the diverging opinions coming from Sega of America and Sega of Japan that led to the 32X and led to the Saturn competing with itself. And it's a long, complicated story that we don't need to tell, but it's out there.
But and I remember too, like when the transition from like this, like a lot of people now, I know a lot of people want like N64 Mini, and there's this super nostalgia for the 64. But I remember going through the 64 era, and there was a lot of droughts of games.
Oh yeah, the thing is, the N64 hasn't exactly aged well. Even its most devout fans will typically say it only has like 20 playable games on it. Yeah, and I am actually very much in favor of the N64. I quite enjoy it, but it doesn't have a lot that really only remained on it, and that people really have any great desire to play again. I think there's games on there that people think they have a desire to play again, such as GoldenEye, which I actually love GoldenEye. I'll still defend it, but I'll promise you now that most people would not be able to play that game now because of how first-person shooters have changed so much.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. You won't get that game anyway because of licensing issues.
Yeah.
So most of its best games were already kind of plucked away from it anyway. I do think that an N64 Mini would sell very well, but I also think that in the end, it's nostalgia goggles, because there were simply better games available on the Super Nintendo than there were on the N64.
Yeah. I mean, I'd even go so far as even the GameCube has better games that age.
I agree completely.
A hell of a lot better. And
I agree completely.
The other console that came out, like the Dreamcast, I remember, and probably this experience is the same for you. Like when you first saw the graphics on the Dreamcast, there was nothing like it at all back in that era.
It was possibly the biggest jump we ever saw in a single console generation.
Yeah. And
I mean, mathematically, it definitely was, but it's just like the most obvious to the most casual of customers. You show them an N64 and then you show them a Dreamcast. It is a night and day difference.
Yeah. And
anyway, sorry.
No. I was just gonna say, like, I remember, like, when 9999 came around. I remember my mom and dad came home with the Dreamcast, and they weren't even gamers, but they were sold on it. They're like, "Yo, this looks so good." Plus, he had the Dreamcast web browser built into it too. Well, not built into it, but that add-on.
Yeah, it came with it.
Yeah. So, and they were sold on it. They're like, "Hey, we got a game console and we can surf the internet." And I don't think kids nowadays understand having like 5-6K modems back in the day. It was like
here's another archaic custom that I think that has been lost to history. You got to remember, around the time the Dreamcast came out, and even when the PS2 was coming out, believe it or not, the PC as an individual device was still not that common. Right? At that point, people had computers in their home, but it was usually like one per family. Yeah. And the idea they were trying to push with game consoles was, hey, you want to browse the internet, but the family's going to use it. You can use your Dreamcast and go to websites, and you can use your PS2 and go to websites. You don't need another computer. That was a very limited concept, but it was one of the big things, particularly with the Dreamcast. I mean, they did go with the keyboard. They did go with the mouse. There was a legitimate, you don't need a whole computer. You can just do a Dreamcast and it'll play your games.
Yep.
That was the thing.
It really was. And, I know my parents were sold on it. And then my dad got into the NFL 2K series, and he would always do coach mode. But he was like, man, it's almost like watching TV. Like, and it was the 2K series. And I think a lot of people don't understand how EA and Sega had bad relationship during that time. But the 2K series came around, and all the way up until like they had to cancel it, and was 2005.
2K5 was the last one they did.
Yeah. Like it really gave EA a run for their money. It really did. And to this day, I still find the 2K series better than modern Madden games. And I don't even like playing Madden. I love playing 2K because I can just pick it up and play. So,
well, there you go. Plus, one of the cool things back then was, again, I'm not one really for football stuff, but one of the cool things about the 2K series is because the Dreamcast had the VMU, you could see the plays on your controller as opposed to the screen. So if you're playing with multiple people, they don't know what you're going to do, which, as I understand in football, is kind of a nice element.
Yeah, it really is. Oh man, good times. But dude, let's talk about like your experience, as a content creator, as a podcast, because you as a podcaster, because you're the host of the Figure It Out cast. Like, what have been some of your ups and downs that you've experienced in your content creator journey?
Well, the ups is I guess this would have been starting around 2015. I had been doing YouTube stuff for like 6 years, and it was like. It was my job, but I was still in that post-college phase where I was just kind of getting by. And then out of nowhere in like 2015, I started getting invited to stuff. I was getting invited to be a guest at conventions. I was getting invited, to events and random things like parties where I'm like, I don't have any business being here. And the one thing I learned was just say yes and go. What I've learned is a lot of people turn that stuff down. Actually, I can tell you this. I won't tell you what company, but I've now worked with a lot of different video game companies.
Go for it.
And they all have massive gripes with influencers because they will look up people for content, right? And they will be like, this person will be a good fit for whatever we're doing. And they will try to reach out to those people. So you've already got a filter in place. Now, once they reach out to those people, about half the people they reach out to never respond. About half the people that do respond say no. So continue to whittle this down here. Of the people that say yes, less than half of them show up. So money gets spent and people don't get on the plane is basically what I'm saying. And of the people who do show up, about half leave early. And about half the people who stay actually produce the content. So it's one thing I've learned is the video game industry is a lot smaller than you might expect as far as the actual people that work in it. And when your name is kind of on that, well, he shows up list, then they keep bringing you back because they're like, well, he's on the approved list. He shows up, he, does what he's supposed to do, and he doesn't give us any shit. So I think that's really all it is. Just, not being an asshole is really, really all I did. And so I started getting invited to a bunch of stuff and I would take it. And it's been really weird. Last year was probably a little too insane. When I mean 2019. So because for those who don't know, I am a big time fan of a franchise that you've probably never heard of called Shenmue. I've been like the champion of this franchise really since it ceased to exist back in 2001, 2002, when you defined its end. And I've just been pushing for it for years in what limited capacity I could as a YouTuber. But Sega got me involved with the re-release of the game. And then eventually I got to be involved with the upcoming release, or at the time it was the upcoming release of Shenmue 3. But because of all this crap, and I say that lovingly, it kept me really busy. And in 2019, I probably spent the equivalency of maybe 2.5 to 3 months at home all year.
Wow.
Meaning the vast majority of the year, I was simply never home. I went to, what was it? 11 different countries last year and 46 different cities. Actually, I bug some of my buddies and just be like, hey, guess where I am? And so I actually keep like a nice record of all these places I ended up. But obviously it wasn't all pertaining to Shenmue 3, of course. But the point is, stuff like that will keep you super busy and you'll get around. But the other cool thing is, and here's for people who like to fly, keep track of your miles, create frequent flyer accounts, because when they're paying for your frequent flyer miles, they add up and then you can go places you want to go. So do that. But so I ended up getting around.
And that's the thing too. I've noticed a lot of people don't get about the gaming industry, and it's one of the things like I've been really championing like the last year since I switched over to, I started incorporating interviewing more of the gaming industry, like people from Capcom and Bandai Namco and more, is trying to get content creators, like, both big and small, that ones who aren't working with the game industry, to understand it's a big industry and it's a very small pool of people that, are the gatekeepers. And a lot of people don't understand, you screw over one, word travels.
Yeah. You're 100% accurate. Like once your name is on one of those like approved like industry lists, you just start getting felt, by other companies who are like, well, such and such company said he was good to work with, so hit him up. And then when you do a good job with them, the word spreads. Like, here's the thing. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I feel like a Kevin Smith type, where when I got to the scene was great and I ruined it. But that's how he describes himself. I like Kevin Smith. I'm not making fun of him. But that's how he always said he like lowered the bar of Hollywood. I feel like I lowered the bar for influencers. Like I got in there and they're like, well, all right, I guess this is what we have to work with now. But because of that, I was able to I've got a bunch of buddies at all these different companies, and I somehow, like I describe it as failing up. I end up getting into like all like these VIP parties where I'm like, why do you want me here? This makes no sense. Like I was actually literally in Guam last week, and I got an invite from some company I had never heard of who was at CES. And they're like, hey, we're hosting this big party in Las Vegas. Well, we want to bring you out and you just be at our party. And I'm like, what? Like, who the hell wants to come see some like YouTube nerd? Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And I couldn't go anyway, but it was like, somehow you end up on these lists of things that want you to be at. And my advice is, if you ever get one of those things, just take it. And even when you're like, well, I don't know, the wife doesn't want me to do it, it's like, well, okay, your wife's important, but if you care about that part of the career, the influencer thing, you're gonna have to say yes to some shit. And that's fortunately for me, you know, my girlfriend and I are in long distance, so it's not really a problem for us, but it's, you know, it's whatever. You have to take that stuff and move to that step if you want to be, I guess, in that club. And I realize how arrogant that probably sounds, but I'm trying to give you the most practical advice I can, because I don't deserve this. The only difference really is that I said yes to stuff that I think a lot of people would be like, I don't know, I don't want to get on a plane and, you know, spend all day doing that. I'm like, fuck that, get on the plane, do it.
Right.
Like, that's, you know, you live once. I can watch TV at home anytime. Why don't I go across the country and go do this cool thing? I realize life's more complicated than that, but I don't know. I consider myself like fortunate on that, but that's really because I don't deserve this. I'm a schlub. Mm-hmm. The only real thing I can tell you that is the correct thing to do on this type of thing is if you ever get, hey, do you want to join us at this thing? Just say yes. Say yes. Get over the anxiety and go.
Yeah. And it's one of the things like I tell content creators all the time, like stop telling, like, especially the smaller content creators, like stop saying I'm a small content creator, because a lot of people in the industry don't care for that. They write you off if you deem yourself that, because it's like, why should they work with you if you don't have confidence in yourself? Like, regardless of your size, you have an audience.
Yep.
You know, and
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, there was an expression in film school that basically they taught us, like, don't shit on your work. There's plenty of people to do that for you.
Yeah.
So you don't need to shit on yourself. I know I'm poking fun of myself, but I'm not shitting on myself. Obviously there is something they like. I'm glad that I haven't figured it out, but they seem to get it. So that said, you're totally right. Even though I do not claim to be the biggest YouTuber out there with the most views ever, when I'm actually in there, I seem to know what I'm doing. And that seems to be something that a lot of people, like you're saying, need to kind of grasp is you don't need to go out there and be like, well, they would never pick me. I'm just doing this for fun, blah, blah, blah. Like, I have never once brought drama or depression or negative thoughts, if you will, to my channel in now over 10 years of doing it. You just make the content you would want to see. You don't go, I don't want to watch someone make a video all about, like, I know guys, you know, every day I do shoe videos, but today we're going to talk about my depression. It's like, no, that's not what we're here for. I'm sorry. I realize to a lot of people, your channel is a way to express yourself, and that's great. But if your goal is to, I guess, say, be an influencer, you got to stick to what people are there to actually watch you for. Yeah. Is that, I mean, I know that can sound kind of douchebaggish, but there is a difference between what your objective is. If you want to be an influencer, you just have to make the content people want to see, as opposed to presuming that everybody watching considers you a friend. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And you know, to add on to what you're saying, you have to treat your channel, your brand, like a brand. You know, your content that you put out, you got to treat it like a brand, because eventually you will have an opportunity to work with, you know, various companies, game, tech, whatever industry. Could be shoe industry, could be clothing. You never know. You never, and the biggest thing is, like I keep trying to tell people, you never know who's watching. You never know. Like there was this content creator, smaller channel. He made this, like, Capcom is re-releasing Devil May Cry 3 on the Switch, right? So this guy retweeted their tweet and talked about how cheap Capcom is, because, you know, they're charging $20 for a game that came out such and such, and, you know, why shouldn't it be like $5 or $10? And it's so stupid. Capcom is so cheap. And then I commented on it. I was like, dude, what makes it cheap? It's smart business. You know, this is the first time the series is on Nintendo. I understand you're upset that it's at that price, whereas on other platforms it's cheaper, but it's never been on Nintendo, and they need to test the waters to see, hey, are there, you know, do we have a viable audience on a Nintendo platform? Like, it's just business.
That's called, what I always tell people, follow the money. If you don't like what the video game industry is doing, just try to follow the money and understand why they're doing it. They're not incompetent. Sometimes, yes, mistakes are made, but they always do things with the same end game. Follow the money. And in the case of Capcom, yes, you're right. Nintendo is not a completely untested platform for them, but it is a risk. There is that family-friendly vibe that goes to it, and they don't know necessarily if the Devil May Cry audience exists on that platform. The reality is, yeah, it probably does, but, you know, you have to make it worth your investment. And if it's successful, you'll get more of those games, probably in some big bundle down the line. You don't like it, don't buy it. Vote with your wallet. That's how it works.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, the dude kept going and going and going. He was talking about how, like, he's like, I don't have the opportunity to play the game at all. And I'm like, wait, do you have a PC? Do you have a PlayStation 4? You have an Xbox, or One or 360 or PS3? And he's like, yeah, I have those. I'm like, so then you have an opportunity to play it. You're just choosing not to. I'm like, don't. And I said to him in the tweet, he deleted the tweet, but I told him, I'm like, dude, if you're trying as a content creator to work with these companies, this is not a good look for you. And the funny thing is, a lot of people that I've either interviewed or I'm cool with in Capcom liked what I tweeted to him. And then as soon as I saw that, I was like, yep, you never know who's watching.
Yeah, exactly. To swing this back around just a little bit to people out there, what you said about it being a brand for yourself is a completely valid point. So when you think about it, I don't know who sells more every year. I'm assuming Coca-Cola sells more than Pepsi, but let's say, for example, Coca-Cola did in fact sell more than Pepsi. Do you think people would really like it if Pepsi tweeted and said, oh, we're depressed because Coke sold more than us. We're number 2. Be like, okay, somebody's losing their shit over at Pepsi's Twitter account. Like it's the same thing. You can't go out there and just be like, I'm not big enough. My channel's not good enough. It's like, okay, nobody's going to try and pull you out of that.
Yeah, they're not. They're really not. And it's, there's a thing about social media etiquette. People need to, especially if you're a content creator, you want to be an influencer or work with brands, you got to learn it. Every thought that goes through your head does not need to be a tweet or a post.
That is also true. Here's the thing. You and I assume, how old are you?
I'm 31, going on 32.
Okay, see, I'm 33. We're right around the same age.
Yeah.
Now, we grew up, I think, as the last generation without the internet. And so when we were kids, we didn't have the option to tweet out some random dumb thought that would come to haunt us later. We didn't get trained to do that. Like I thought plenty of stupid things as a little kid. Like when I was like a real little kid, there was a time where I thought, oh, white milk comes from white cows and chocolate milk comes from brown cows. It's a stupid thing you would think, but you don't tweet that out. But a kid could do that now, and it will like haunt them forever. And you'll just get in this habit of any dumb thought I put out there. Our generation is a tad more reserved and like, that might be kind of stupid to put out there. Maybe I shouldn't do that.
Right.
And that's something you need to kind of grasp. And the younger generation, and we sound like old fogies, we really do. Like this whole thing has been like, remember the 90s? How good it was, the games. You don't know games. But you got to get more in the habit of just kind of double checking what you're about to say before you actually pull the trigger on that, because once it's out there, it's kind of out there forever.
Yeah. Even if you delete it, folks, it's not deleted. It's still there. You can still find it. So think it over, like sound it out in your head, reread it, have somebody else look at it.
Yeah,
if you're not certain, and then if it still doesn't, if you have that inclination that this might not go over well, don't post it.
Exactly.
But yeah, man, it's super crazy. Like, and honestly, like with the stuff that you and I do, and the doors is open. Like the biggest thing that's happened to me last year, it's so crazy to say last year or 2019. I still want to say 2019 was 2020.
Yeah, that'll happen for the next month or so.
Right? But like the craziest thing that happened to me was being able to go to E3. Like last year.
Oh, dude, I was there.
What? Oh, yeah, you were.
Last 3 years in a row.
Yeah, you were.
Hit me up if you're going this year. We'll figure something out.
Dude, I want to go. I'm trying to figure out because the company that sent me last year was PDP. They sent me out, which I was completely shocked by that. They sent my wife and I out, and we're, it was such a surreal experience. I don't know if they're gonna do it again, but yeah,
you'd be surprised. I'm not going to name any names, but there are companies you just ask them and they're like, yeah, sure.
What?
I won't go any further details.
Okay. Well, now that
you've already had it happen once, and if it wasn't for a particular reason other than they were just nice to you, it's actually quite possible that all you have to do is email them and be like, yo, thanks again for bringing me last year. If it's possible, I'd love to go again this year. And like, here's your flight, here's your hotel, have fun.
Right?
Wow. It really, guys, it gets to that point if you are good at this. And I don't mean that arrogantly. I just mean like, that is an attainable goal. It's just, you just don't put out depressing tweets that complain about the industry you're trying to work in. Try to change the industry you're trying to work in. Don't just sit there and bitch on Twitter like a baby. That doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah.
You want real progress in the industry? Get into the industry and do it from the inside.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm sorry, but that's, just, I don't know how else to explain it any other way.
No, it's true, dude. It is so crazy the amount of people I talk to on a daily, and they're like, man, I wish I could do this. I'm like, yo, stop tweeting that. Stop posting that on Facebook. Well, I mean, I don't know if Facebook is a viable platform for content creation aside from like streaming, but
their gaming platform is doing pretty well, but that's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah. But I'm like, if it's negative or if it's a shot at a company, stop it. Just stop.
You're trying to make friends, not enemies. It's not that hard.
Right. And when you get to a good point where you're good with a couple of companies, when a game comes out, sometimes you don't even have to reach out to them. They'll be like, hey, you want to cover this? Would you like to review this? Would you like to stream this?
Yep.
I shit you guys not. It happens. Like,
yeah, I get emails like that daily. I literally can't read them all. Like, I have to. Most of them just go to my instant delete. I don't have time for it.
Okay. Let me ask you this: do you have like a separate? I had to create a separate email.
Yeah, I've got 4.
I need to get on your level. I only have 1.
Yeah, no, I've got 4 to separate different types of things. It's like business emails, personal emails, spam. And then business emails pertaining to outside of YouTube. It's whatever. It's a method of
Oh man, yeah. It gets to that point, people. Like honestly, and really, like one of the things I've come to learn too, and I just want to share with you guys again, is the size of your channel or your platform is not the most imperative thing. If you've got 10 people, that's 10 potential buyers, and you got to look at it from a marketing perspective, people. Like, honestly, it's cheaper for companies to work with content creators or influencers than it is to pay a PR firm, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands for like a 30-minute clip or 30-minute commercial.
That is 100% accurate. And also there's, I'm spacing on the term, but there is a term for valuable views. Like, some companies blindly only care about views as a raw number because that's their only metric to go by, but it's an ignorant metric because a bot could generate those types of views. What they care about is views that are actually return on investment. So, for example, views from my channel are people who are actually interested in that subject matter and likely are loyal to the content itself, and that's why they're there. So the views are more likely if, for example, I don't do this, but if I was to do like a game review on something and my conclusion of it was like, oh man, this game's amazing, you should go buy it. Everyone who clicked on the video is more likely to buy it than they are if it's just a bunch of people watching it because you happen to be PewDiePie. Now, PewDiePie, of course, is huge, and he was going to outperform me anyway. But point is that they care more about valued views as opposed to just raw numbers. In most cases, there are certain companies where that's not the case at all. But as the industry is changing, that's becoming more the situation because people are the companies are understanding more the value of views versus like real views. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I got I think it was Capcom and Koch Media. They sent me the Capcom Home Arcade, and I saw that, and one of the things, like, anytime a company sends me a product, I always ask them, like, what are some points that you would like me to cover that I may already cover it, but what are things you want me to highlight? And when I got it, I looked at other reviews after I had already went through my own review of it. I looked at other reviews and I saw all these negative, and people were bashing like, oh, you don't need to buy it. You should go buy one of those cheap Chinese knockoffs, or you just get an arcade 1-up cabinet. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go at it with a different approach. An approach I went with it, I'm like, okay, so it's, it's not in the US yet. People, it's coming soon. It's $250, but you get 16 games. It's got online capability, and down the pipeline, they're going to be adding more games to it for free. So it's like, for that same price, if you were to buy an Arcade 1-Up cabinet, you only get 3 games, maybe 4. And this is just literally pull it out of the box, plug it in versus setting it up. And it's got it's got high-end quality parts, Sanwa, buttons, and, an octagonal gate. So I'm like, that's a lot of value. And so I highlighted that. And it's so funny. The Koch Media and Capcom like, hey, if there's anything else we're going to do, we want to go to you. As we're going to come to you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people that, like a lot of purists are like, man, it's trash. It's a trash piece of, hardware. And I'm like, okay, so have you tried it? Like, no. How do you know it's trash?
Yeah. See, now our method's slightly different. When somebody contacts me, I will only review stuff I have some sort of core interest in. Same I have to be honest, an Arcade 1-Up, they would be right not to target me because I would never do a video about it. But for example, like Hyperkin or Pound, they send me like these HDMI cables for consoles that I know full well are not particularly good. And that's generally the consensus I give on these videos. I'm like, look, what they did is consumer grade. It's meant for just somebody to plug in and enjoy. This is not for me, but this is what it looks like if you want to check it out. Honesty is also highly valued, and I always stick with that as much as possible. I'm not saying you don't, I'm sure you do, but it's also being, creative about what to present, because it's a good move to ask them what they want you to highlight. But at the same time, I like to find that organically just to see, like, this is what I noticed when I was tinkering with it. The Hyperkin and Pound cable have the exact same converter inside of them. Basically, they're identical, things like that. But it is good to just be like, well, how does this work? Because you might miss it on your own review and be like, oops, that was a dumb oversight, which I've
No, I completely agree with you. Like, especially about the honesty thing too, because if something's not good, I'm not afraid to say, okay, this product isn't good. But one of the things, like I tell people too, there's a way to give constructive criticism about a product if it's not good, but to let the company know this is where you can improve versus it's trash, fuck this thing, don't buy it, it's complete garbage. Like, because perception,
Yeah, you don't want to be known as the guy who just shits on everything, because unless that's your goal. Unless your goal is to be the guy who shits on everything and has to do the whole platform himself, that's fine. But if your goal is to get into the industry, which maybe it's not, but if it is, like you're saying, you have to find ways to criticize with validity and give constructive feedback. Be like, look, I didn't like your particular cable for X, Y, and Z reasons. Here's what I think you can do better, and hopefully you do next time, as opposed to like, these guys are shit. Everything they make is shit. It's all shit. Fuck these guys, shit. Like, it's like, okay, well, you just told them, along with anybody else who watches your channel, that you can't be trusted to give a good review. And I don't mean positive. I'm not sitting here saying that the video has to be positive and you have to just do some corporate cocksucking. We're not saying that shit.
Yeah.
But what we are saying is you need to come off as a professional, and just sitting there and just being like, everything about their product is shit. These guys are idiots. I could have done it better. Blah, is like, the arrogance of that is astonishing. And if you want that, if you want to be the guy who just does that in his basement or whatever and is angry about it, that's fine. If that's your end game, that's fine. And no one's going to judge you for it. But if your goal is to get into the industry and actually fix these problems, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely are.
There you go.
So I hope the audience, I hope you guys are enjoying, the information we're giving you about the inside of the gaming industry and the tech industry. Like, and I hope this helps you guys, going forward.
They're seeing how the burger is made. They're meeting the cow.
Right. But let's switch gears, man. I want to talk about like podcasting and
sure.
Like, what got you into podcasting? What is it about podcasting that keeps you going?
It's kind of funny because this is not at all the same way as you. I once again fell into it completely. I over the course of my channel, I never really had much intention of ever doing a podcast, and I ended up being a guest on a few of them over time. I just thought it was fun to do that. But as time went along, I eventually opened up a Patreon account. Not because I actually was asking for people for money on Patreon, but because there were people pretending to be me to bilk people who watch me out of money.
Wow.
That was, yeah, I know, right? So I was like, look, I'll create a Patreon so that if you actually want to support me, you have a safe place to do it. But at the end of the day, the Patreon is not really a big goal of mine. It never was. I don't promote it very much. I just have it there so that if people want to support it, they can. Only because I felt terrible finding out that that had happened to a few people. Anyway, so I was like, okay, if you're going to have a Patreon, you need to have some sort of exclusive or special content to it. And the first thing that came to my mind was a podcast. It was a thing I wasn't doing on any sort of regular basis. So I thought, you know, why not? I talk a lot. There's really no reason I couldn't talk all the time to myself. And immediately I started having certain people on the podcast because that was an option I was having where people could, you know, basically fund to be on it. And I was doing that for like a year before, unfortunately, the guy had to bail out. But occasionally that'll happen from time to time. And it's fun. You get to interview guests. But also, like I said, I talk a lot. So if it's just me, I have no problem going on for like an hour consecutively, just going from subject to subject to subject. But again, never set out to do a podcast, just fell into it. That term just defines my entire career. Never meant to do it, just fell into it.
And isn't that the fun part? Is like you're just doing it, you know, because it's fun and it's something different, and then it grows organically into something. You're like, well, shit. Yeah. Awesome.
Though to be fair, the podcast I do is the least viewed thing I do on my YouTube channel, but I don't care. It's still fun to do. And I know it does have its fan base, which is, you know, I'm happy with.
I was going to say this too, because I have the same situation like with my podcast. Like when I do the video version of my podcast that I upload on YouTube, it is the least viewed thing on there. But like, and a lot of people tell me like, man, you should probably just like get rid of video versions of your podcast. I'm like, no, it's for the body of work. Like if someone wants to see like the video version, okay, here you go. I know I focus more on like, you know, the Apple Podcasts, the Spotify, the Pandora version of it. But like,
it makes sense because that's a built-in audience that's there for podcasts. And I recognize that too. I just don't want to be responsible for managing even more platforms. That's my own thing. So I basically just put it on YouTube, which I realize is wrong, but I got too much shit on my plate, man.
No, that's fine. It's fine. And it goes back to like what we were saying earlier. Like people don't realize like the amount of work, like multiple platforms, like, you know, trying to do, you know, YouTube and Twitch and Mixer or whatever else. It can be draining. It can be very draining. Like I used to try to put the podcast on Twitch as well as, you know, YouTube and try to do it on Mixer. And I'm like, okay, I can't. I dropped Twitch. I'm like, I'm just going to put it on YouTube. And, you know, that's for the video version. Or sometimes I have exclusive stuff just for my patrons. And like they'll get stuff like a month or so early because I'll do like for like a whole week. I'll probably do like 10 or 15 podcasts. And I'm like, okay, now I've recorded it. I need to edit it. Once I edit it, okay, patience, you guys can look at this first.
Exactly. It's work, everybody. You're only hearing the glamorous side. The other side's dirty, but you got to do it.
And it's the other thing, like I want to ask you about Patreon, because I know a lot of people, it can be like a touchy subject. A lot of people have a dislike for Patreon, but I agree with you when it comes to like having a Patreon. You do need to have some type of exclusive content to give value or reasons people can support you. And if they want to, it's there. If people want, like even with this, you know, my channel, my outlet, and my things that I make, I have a Patreon. If people want to support, you don't have to, you know.
Exactly. It's completely optional.
So, you know, I know there's this controversy now, like they're the anti-Patreon, anti-YouTubers making money group of people that I've seen on YouTube.
Yeah, you should definitely be anti-people getting paid for their job. I agree.
Right? Like, and they're like, well, it's not a job, you know? They need to get a real job. And I'm like...
Look, the easiest counter to that ever is, okay, man, if it's not a job... I invite you to do it. You'll become super successful overnight, and you'll see how it's really easy, and it's not any work. And wow, I'm on easy street because I made a YouTube video. Try it. I invite you to do that. And if you're successful, congratulations, you're one of the few. If you're not, Now you get it. It's hard.
Oh,
like, we
man.
agree, dude, we're not building buildings. No one disputes that. We're not doing hard labor, but that doesn't make it not a job. I mean, you argue with, that's the stupidest thing, is you got people arguing with YouTubers who are basically just regular Joes trying to make it. But when we hear like, oh, you know, Schwarzenegger is getting like 20 million to do a movie or whatever, does anybody bat an eye to that? They're just like, oh, well, of course. It's like, he's an entertainer. He's doing the same damn thing. He's just on a bigger level. Yet that's fine. Nobody's telling you that you have to support our Patreons or you have to watch us or anything like that. It's just not the case.
Yeah. And that's actually, dude, that's the same thought I have. Like, you know, no one goes after like Brad Pitt or you know, Ben Affleck when they're doing a movie. They're doing the same thing. They're creating content. They're doing things that people are watching, that people are enjoying, people are supporting financially. So why is it wrong for us as creators? Because effectively that's what we are. We're creating content that people are consuming. Why is it wrong for us to get paid?
Yeah, and it's like, do you ever? It's like, I've said this before, but it's kind of like, if I don't know, like what somebody out there does. Like, let's say they work at, it doesn't matter, they work at Target or anything. Who cares? How would you feel if you're a said employee, after you've done your job, you go to pick up your check, and your boss tells you you're really greedy for wanting to get paid?
Right?
Would you react like, well, he's got a point? No. This is the world we live in. It's human beings are stupid. We created an economic system, a completely made up thing to control us, to have society function. Yep. It's stupid, but it's the rules we all seem to agree to. We need these paper squares or paper rectangles to function. It's just how it is. So we need to do that too. This is simply the outlet in which we did it. And it's funny because, like, if I tweet right now, like, hey, everybody, sign up to my Patreon, it's only $5 a month, you're going to get a bunch of people like, fuck you, I don't want to do that. But if I were to tweet out like, guys, I'm quitting YouTube because I got like a $20 million movie gig, you'd be celebrating. I mean, aside from the fact that I'm no longer on YouTube, which should probably get more celebrations, but you'd be celebrating for me because it's like, oh, he got paid. But then when I'm like, oh no, Patreon, $5, somehow fuck you for that. It's society's weird, man.
It really is, dude. I swear I don't understand it.
Yeah. It's like that same argument of, like, you know, like a robber steals an old lady's purse and gets away with $25. He gets like 15 years in prison. Some like corporate CEO dude embezzles like $100 million and he gets like a week. Right? Like, what the hell is that?
And he gets a cushy week too.
Yeah, he gets like a voluntary week in prison.
It's crazy.
I don't know. Society's messed up. That's
it really is.
Society has problems, and all we do is talk about it and make fun of it. That's about all we can do.
Exactly. Oh man. So you know, other thing, like, I want to ask, I know we touched on it earlier a little bit, but I want to cycle back around to it. And I have a couple more questions if you got the time.
Yeah, hopefully.
Go for it. So you know, let's dive into it. Like, your experience with, like, or more correctly, the surrealness of working with the gaming industry. Like, how surreal is it for you?
I thought it was a joke when it first started. Like, the first company that ever reached out to me in any like real, like, serious way was Ubisoft. They invited me out to Los Angeles for a Rainbow Six Siege event. And I could not understand why, because it was like, I had no relationship with them. I didn't play the previous ones. Like, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then the content I produced from it, or, well, myself and my team at the time produced from it, they quite enjoyed. And it was just like, okay, cool. You keep getting to go behind the curtain and see how everything works. And then that spreads. And so you start getting invited to a whole bunch of things from different companies. And you get to the point where you're on like a first name, if not friendly basis, with people who are super powerful in that industry. And you're like, huh, all right. Now I keep saying, you see how the cow is slaughtered and the meat is made. And it can leave you somewhat jaded, but it can also leave you kind of, I guess, it sounds arrogant, but I guess informed. So when you hear people bitching on YouTube like, they shouldn't be doing this, like, you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. You don't know half of what you're saying, because it's not your fault. You don't have enough information. And the problem that you learn with the video games industry is, like every other industry, they can only tell you small pieces because certain bits of information can be too easily misconstrued. I mean, look at your Facebook feed. It's going to be, you get the same story, no matter what it is, you have multiple perspectives on it that are completely different. Not to get like super political or anything like that, but like just take the recent events in Iran. Anyone who comments on it will have a completely different perspective of what's happening there. So to a much less extreme degree, of course, it's the same thing with video games. It's like, oh, this game is only going up on Epic, so let's kill everyone at Epic. It's like, no, you don't understand why that happened. You're not trying to understand why that happened. You just think you're right with no information. It's you start learning this stuff and you just go, okay, whatever.
Right. I mean, and it's so true too. Like, there's so many people that I know, like that you know, they're like, they'll do their hot takes on the gaming industry or hot takes on whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool story, bro. Where'd you find that information out? And they're like, oh, well, I didn't need to look it up. I know. I'm like, okay, you're one of those.
Yeah, I got news for you. Those guys don't get invited to shit.
Right.
You know, the people who do are the people who don't exacerbate the problem. They show up and they actually learn what the situation is and try to put out fires because they actually have the facts. It's one of those things where even I'm doing it myself. I can only talk about so much of it, and you just kind of get frustrated, but you just kind of fine, whatever. Like, I will see people who will like intentionally try to cough up drama about things, and they I don't think they do it because they have malintent. I think they do it because with the limited bit of information they have, what the narrative is to them makes sense, and therefore they're putting that narrative out there. The problem is we've stopped investigating for some reason. We've stopped at like the headline and decided, okay, I'll blow up my own narrative from that point.
Yeah.
And that creates stupidity.
Yeah, it does. There's, you know, and the misinformation that goes out there. And I feel like for a lot of people who get to, you know, review things or get to work with the industry, like it kind of, sometimes it falls on us to dispel a lot of this misinformation that is put out there. And sometimes, you know, and for the audience who don't know, it can be draining. Like when you're constantly like, people are, oh, well, this such and such said this and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, no. Well, how do you know? That's not how it works.
Yeah, believe me, I noticed, because you can have the behind the scenes information of exactly how a situation went down. People will make up stuff and you go on and be like, yeah, that's not quite right. And then you get accused of being like a sellout and all this other stuff. And you're like, no, I'm not. I didn't take any money for this. I just know the reality, but I can't explain to you why I know it, because there's a thing called NDAs that exist.
Right.
The NDAs are possibly the most annoying thing ever, because they are essentially a legal way to prevent the truth from coming out and protect the guilty while pushing the innocent. But it's just a reality that you live in. And that I will not go into any examples, of course, but that is just a thing throughout the industry.
Yeah. It really is. And, you know, some people, oh God, some people just don't understand. Like when you sign it, you are bound to it. Yeah. You're very much bound to it.
Yeah. It's hilarious because I've seen so many comments from people over the years. Like, if you know something, just say it. I don't care about your NDA. It's like, yeah, but I do, dumbass. Like,
right.
Like, I don't want to be like brought into court or have charges filed against me because you really needed to know that shit. Like,
right.
It's not how it works.
It's like, just tell us, man. We don't care. You'll be fine. No.
I don't even get that you'll be fine. Just tell us. We don't care about your NDA. It's like, wow. Cool, man.
Dude, it's so crazy. And too, like a lot of games, like, okay, I'm sure this happens to you too. Like when you're reviewing like some games that come up, when these companies reach out to you, a lot of us get them a couple months ahead of release. And, you know, some people, you know, some of your audience may know, oh, you got it. What are your thoughts on it? Can't say anything.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but that's the problem. That's where it goes into that same thing where they're like, oh, you're being paid, you're being bought, you won't talk about it. It's like, no, I signed an NDA. That just means I'm not allowed to, because that's how it works. Why would they allow me access early if I was going to just shit all over it like months before it comes out? That's just, you have to honor certain rules. It's like agreements between nations. You may not like that you can't extradite the guy from Brazil, but you can't. It's an agreement. It's a rule. It's just how it is. That's, again, humans are stupid. We set up this, rectangle money system that we all have to follow. It's just the rules, and we can't violate it because your curiosity is piqued. I'm sorry. And I know we're both probably coming off like pricks right now, and we're not trying to do that, but we're both frustrated, and you can tell when we talk to each other about the same subject that we're both sitting in the same boat being like, motherfucker, like we get it. We get it. And I'm sorry, but you would be in our same position if you've ever gone through this type of thing before. You'd be like, wow, these guys really know what the hell they're talking about. And it makes you really jaded. But I trust you. There's good guys on the inside. We're good guys on the inside trying to facilitate positive change for the gamer. But it does fuck with your head a lot because you're just like, why does it work like this? But you try to understand that system, and that therefore you can help to change that system from the inside rather than bitching at companies on Twitter, which, by the way, I got news for you, they don't really pay much attention to.
They really don't. They
like
really
they'll see your tweets, but they're like, there's usually just like one guy who sits on his couch who's got access to that account and just goes LOL and moves on. Like that's not how it works. That's not how it works.
I had one guy, I had one dude tweet at me about my, he was bitching about the Capcom home arcade thing, and he's like, man, I hate that there's exclusive games on it and they're using illegal ROM and blah 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 and all this other stuff, and I'm over here like, I'm in the camp of either you buy it or you don't. If you do, cool. If you don't, I couldn't care less. And then I told the dude, look, you also know I never tweet about companies in a negative light because you never know who's watching. And then he's like, well, it's your right to do that. But on the same token, if you don't talk about them on Twitter, then how will they know if they're doing something right or wrong? Sometimes you got to bash them. I'm like, okay. How's that working for you?
Yeah, that's a great way to not understand the industry whatsoever. Here's a dirty little secret of the gaming industry. When you're in it, they ask you for your opinion and they make changes on that basis. They trust me when they say they don't go to like, Jim Bob with the holding a picture of a fish who's bitching at Capcom all misspelled and saying like, oh, that guy's opinion's important. They get the games industry people who are like people like us in there and be like, all right, dude, you just played our game. What do you think? We still got time to change it. And that's where you sit there and you be honest with them and you make changes. I've done this multiple times. This is a thing. They're not like your Twitter that's not what they're paying attention to. I'm sorry. It's just the truth of it.
And it's so true. And here's another thing. I've run into this too with other creators that I've helped, and I do help a lot of them, how to get codes and whatnot and work with companies. And a lot of them, and I've kind of started scaling back on this because I've started to see this. A lot of people that I've helped getting codes, they don't like do the review, or they don't stream it, or they don't talk about it. They'll get the code and just sit on it. And they're like, yeah, I didn't like it. And I'm like, then why did you request the code? I thought it'd be good. I'm not going to play it. I'm like, okay, but did you tell them that?
Yeah, you need to give feedback. Now, here's the thing. People send me codes all the time that are unsolicited. And in that context, I feel no requirement to do anything with the material.
Right.
But if I request a code and say like, hey, man, I really want to check out such and such game for X, Y, and Z reasons, I don't get the game and then ghost it. But then again, I also don't review request codes. But if that's happened a few times and then they were covered, usually in a neutral light, whether I liked it or not, it doesn't really matter. But you gotta fulfill your agreement. It's not just a code sent by a bot. It's a guy you made an agreement with that you're choosing not to honor. Thus, you are no longer respected, or they are no longer interested in you. Even if you hate the game, you gotta do something, because only because you requested it. That's a specific. If they sent it to you on their own, that's different.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't get that. Like it's frustrating. God, I know I sound like I'm bitching.
No, the same with me. We sound like assholes right now. And I'm sorry to everybody listening. I swear neither of us are assholes. We are coming off like that and we don't mean to, but you have to understand, if you're in our position, you become very jaded.
Right? You really do. It's so many times, man. Like I just tell people, like, just please, like, if you're gonna request it and they give it to you, if Capcom or Bandai Namco or Rockstar Games, if they give you a code that you have requested and you don't touch it for like 6-7 months, and then you request something else from them and you don't get it, don't ask me, oh, why are they not giving me a code? It should be fucking obvious.
Yep. It's like you didn't do your homework, basically.
It's yeah. Anyway, moving on to
sorry,
more. Moving on
I
to
swear
more.
we're nice.
We really are. We're nice people. We're just it's when you work in this long enough, you get. I only have 3 years in it, man. I don't even have the time you have in it. You've seen a hell of a lot more than I have.
I'm like a grizzled war vet when it comes to this crap.
Oh, man. But there's the upside of it, people. After a while, when you've established yourself and companies know about you, you have the ability to pick and choose.
That's correct. But and in all seriousness, though, stay honest to yourself. Yeah. Stay honest with your reviews. Stay honest with your content. Do not pander to anyone. Despite what it sounds like we're saying, always play ball. No, don't pander. Don't be full of shit. Just keep yourself honest. If you request a product and they send it to you, you have to cover it. Now, what you say about it is entirely up to you. We recommend constructive criticism, but that's your choice. But if something is sent to you unsolicited, you're not required to do anything with it. And I don't mean like you're never legally required to do anything with it, but I mean socially. If a company sent that to you without talking to you about it, that's on them. The same goes with game content or any of that sort of stuff. But if you agree to cover something one way or another, you best do that. Yeah. And it's also best, again, give constructive feedback if you dislike something. Going out there and just shitting all over it for the sake of doing so, it's a good way to kiss a career goodbye.
Yeah, it really is.
Because you might think like, hey, this one company, I don't care if this company doesn't message me again, whatever, their games suck, their products suck, whatever. Yeah, but it's a small industry, man, and people move jobs constantly. That guy remembers when he goes over to another company, like that dude was unreliable, that dude caused drama. Your name gets around. It just does. It is amazing how few people actually work in this industry successfully.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So, and continuing on with talking about the industry, I wanted to ask you, like, what was it like getting to meet and work with, Yu Suzuki-san and, our mutual friend Corey Marshall on Shenmue 3? Like, dude,
I've never worked with either of them, but Corey Marshall is one of my best friends now. He and I bug him all the time, but Yu Suzuki, I've met him a few times, hung out with him. He knows my name now, which is cool. I met him the first time was this year at, now technically last year at E3, just by happenstance. It's kind of a long story, but I ran into him. The short version is I ran into him 4 times in 3 days, completely by coincidence.
Wow.
I know. And I even, I kind of accidentally sweet talked my way into playing, Shenmue 3. I walked into this little booth area and he's just sitting there. And he's just like, I'm going to guide you through Shenmue 3. His English is better than he lets on, but his translator's still there. And it was really surreal. But, I've met him a few times now. Los Angeles for E3, Paris for the Japan Expo, Paris, Tokyo for Tokyo Game Show, Kyoto for Magic Kyoto. Been to a bunch of this stuff just to push, Shenmue content and so on and so forth. Hell of a nice guy. It's cool to be, I guess, on that acquaintance type of level. Because I don't speak Japanese, I will never be on a friendly type of level, but it's cool, to be instantly recognized and just, he'll come over and shake my hand, say it's good to see you, good night, or whatever.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. One day I will elaborate on more of the stories I went through, but at the moment, let's just say NDAs still exist.
Okay. I understand.
Yeah.
So let's talk about with Corey Marshall. Like, a lot of people don't know he's fucking awesome.
Oh, he's an awesome guy. Yeah, do you ever want him on here, dude? He'll do it.
No, I had him on last year.
You got him before me. Okay.
What? No, I had him on here. So right after, actually, I reached out to him I want to say beginning of September, and then I did HawaiiCon, which, oh my God, that got me in. HawaiiCon was an amazing and very frustrating experience because I got to sit on a panel with the son of the creator of Dungeons and Dragons, Luke Gygax.
Mm-hmm.
That was super surreal. And I also got to interview Vic Mignogna, but a lot of people, that was a whole bunch of drama last year. And I'm over here like, look, I'm a podcaster. I'm just interviewing. I'm not taking a side. It's just, we're talking about music and his career. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people like, oh, you're supporting it. I'm like, no. I'm a podcaster. I'm just interviewing.
You're essentially a host. You're an MC.
Exactly. That is exactly what I was. And like HawaiiCon invited me out. They're like, hey, would you like to do this? I'm like, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I'm, you know, my wife and I were getting ready to leave HawaiiCon, then Corey, he calls me. He's like, hey, man, you still want to do that interview? I was like, yeah, sure. When? He's like, I'm free now. I'm like, I got to go to the airport. Can we do it tomorrow? He's like, yeah, sure. Let's do it. And so, like, literally, it was only supposed to be half an hour. And dude, we were shooting the shit for like I want to say almost 3 hours. We were just shooting the shit. He's a great conversationalist.
Yeah, Corey's a good dude.
Yeah. Yeah, he's fucking awesome. And like, honestly, man, like I'd actually love to do a show with you and him on here because like I like
Dude,
having
that's not a tough sell.
No, I got it. I'm sure you've run into this too, where you've had guests that don't like to talk and you're carrying the conversation. That can be draining.
Yes, to an extent, yes. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
you've had that happen.
Yeah, well, you have to understand my podcast is either because I do it by myself, and the only people who are on it have either paid to be there or someone paid for them to be there. They're generally more excited to do it, but that doesn't mean that they're always like ready to go when they're actually on mic. They can be like, I thought I was ready. And then they just don't really say much.
Right.
So I understand exactly what you're saying.
I think one of the last voice actors I had on, I'm not going to name her name. You guys can look and find out. But I had her on and I was like, yo, I can't believe I got the voice actress for Nier. You know, on time. I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a huge fan. That lasted all of 15 minutes. I was like, really? You don't want to talk? And it's just because they're, you know, some of them just aren't ready. It goes back to what you said.
I think I might know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I
won't say any further. I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Yeah. But, you know, sometimes I had situations like that where I'm like, I got to carry the conversation. I'm like trying to keep it going. And then after a while, it's like, okay, this isn't going anywhere. Let's go ahead and wrap this up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, one advantage, I mean, you and I both have this because you are a podcaster by nature, so therefore you're going to be very chatty. I've been doing YouTube for over a decade, and I've been described by many people, including other YouTubers, as too wordy for YouTube. So I'm not, like unfamiliar with the concept of talking confidently. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you and I can just shoot the shit like for eternity, which is going to get boring to your audience. I apologize.
Nah, they're used to it. No, if it's a podcast that's under like half an hour, they'll be messaging me like crazy. Like, is that it? Can you get them back on? Can you?
What's your all-time record length?
Okay, so the record length was 5.5 hours.
I once did, and you can find it on my channel, a live stream Q&A of just myself. 7 hours and 1 minute.
Jesus Christ! Are you serious?
And I only stopped because I had to go to the bathroom. The only reason I stopped. Like there's no tag out. I couldn't go and be like, all right, guys, watch somebody else for a few minutes. Like, no. So I just had to give up.
Oh, man. And sometimes I don't think the audience.
Don't worry, guys. We're not going for 7 hours.
Yeah, we're not. But like, it's one of the things like I don't think people understand. Like sometimes when you're like time can fly when you're in. You know, you're just talking. Either to yourself or to like a guest, if there's a good chemistry going or you're in the right mood, it'll just go. And then you'll look up and you're like, oh shit, how long has it been? You know?
Yeah, speaking of which, it's been long enough that we could have watched Bambi almost twice.
Right?
That'll happen, man.
Yeah. So, you know, winding down to the last couple questions and to be
dude, that wasn't an excuse to wrap things up. I was just pointing it out.
Okay. But
no, I'm fine. What you got? Let's do this.
Okay, cool. So What are some of your interests that fans, fans of yours may not be aware of that you'd like to share? Like anything?
Okay. Some of this stuff comes out casually, so some of them are aware of it. Like I'm actually a huge Chicago Bulls fan. In my live streams, you'll see behind me, I have like a Derrick Rose autographed jersey. I will occasionally talk about the NBA like a lot. Right now, this year they suck. I was, as I mentioned earlier, I was just in Guam, and you can check my Instagram on this because it was hilarious. I was walking around. You guys have them, ABC stores. You know that chain?
Yeah.
So they have those in Guam too. And I go. It's kind of, for those who don't know, it's kind of just like a. How would you describe it? Just like a convenience store, basically.
It's a convenience store. It's like every 5 steps there's one.
Yeah, in Hawaii and in Guam and various parts of Japan, that's definitely true. Convenience store that also sells a lot of touristy, kitschy shit, but
overpriced.
So I went into one and I just saw like what looked like a Chicago Bulls hat, and I'm like, that's really random. Now the Chicago Bulls, you'll see their logo all over the world. Passionate fans everywhere, mostly because of the Michael Jordan era. This one was unique because it didn't say Chicago on it. It showed the Bulls logo and the Bulls, but it replaced Chicago with the word Guam. And so I was like, Guam Bulls. And so I took a photo and I posted it, and I was like, I'm sorry to say the Bulls were so bad this year they got relocated to Guam. But I did buy that hat. I had to own it. I've got it. So I was like, that's awesome. And there was some other just weird knockoff hats. Like they had one that showed Batman and it just said Guam on it. Like his name was Guam Man. It just made no sense. And I'm like, this is weird. This isn't some like strange like place where English is a second language. I mean, this is a territory of the United States.
Yeah.
It's like a few congressional votes away from being a state, but whatever.
Right?
Anyway, so basically what I'm saying is I pay a lot of attention to the NBA. One thing I'm super into, although I never talk about this, is American history, a lot to do with presidential history, stuff like that. But
important stuff to know
through, film school with the purpose of intention of being a film director and all that. And so like I have a whole lot of side hobbies, but what I built the career around was video games, which is not at all what was intended, but it just kind of happened.
Hey, it's sometimes it's like that. It's like, this is my career.
I'm super passionate about flying. I love doing that. Although I think people have figured that one out.
You're like, okay, so this year alone, how many trips do you think you'll make by the end of the year?
Oh, dude, I have no idea. You're talking about 2020?
2020.
At this point in time, we're only a week in. I've been to Tokyo, I've been to Narita, I've been to Yokohama, I've been to Guam. Now I'm back in Chicago, and it's only the 9th. Within 7 days. And I was actually supposed to go, a second I landed from Chicago, I was supposed to fly off to Los Angeles for a gig, but that got slightly delayed. So I'm kind of more or less just waiting for that to come back. I already have plans. I'm supposed to go to New York soon. I'm supposed to go to Seattle. I'm supposed to go to Phoenix. And Sacramento, and as I'm sure will happen, is San Francisco, because I get sent there a lot. And that's what I know right now.
And E3.
Oh, and I'm going to San Antonio for PAX South in like a couple weeks.
Oh, you're gonna run? Both of my friends are
San Antonio. I'm gonna do both.
I think 2 of my friends are gonna be there. Nick Apostolides and Ruben Langdon. They're both gonna be there.
Score.
Nice.
Yeah, if there's something happening, there's a good chance I'm going to be there. It's at least like 50% chance I'll be at any convention that exists. You can always just look out. I'm probably there. I show up everywhere.
I got to go one day. Like Nick was telling me, he's like, man, you need to go to PAX South. I'm like, I wish.
PAX South is not the best PAX. I'm going to put that out there.
Ooh, which one would you say is the best?
PAX West, Seattle.
Keep hearing that.
Unless you like tabletop gaming, then PAX South is the best.
Yeah, see, I'm not a fan.
If you like video games, PAX South is not the best.
Okay.
That's all I can say. If you were to take the time to fly up, spend the money or whatever you have to do to get from, I'm assuming you're on the Big Island because you mentioned you went to Hawaii Con, and then you had to fly, which is probably in Honolulu, I'm guessing.
No. Well, I live in Honolulu. Like our house is right down the street from Diamond Head Crater.
Oh, nice. We'll get back to that in a second. So where was Hawaii? Was it on the Big Island?
Yeah, but Kona. I think Kona.
Kona.
Yeah, Kona. Kona.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I stand corrected. But I was actually in Honolulu last year, now a year and a half ago, whatever, in summer 2018. Cool place. But
Dude,
yeah,
you ever come out here? You need a place to stay. We have
that would be amazing. That shit's expensive.
Yeah, that's what I was telling Corey too. I was like, dude, anytime you come out here, I said we have a 3-bedroom house. So
I'm warning you, dude. I will show up. And
do it.
If the follow me on Twitter if you don't already, you'll see it. Like, where the fuck is he now? He's like in San Diego. He's just everywhere. I will show up when there's a free bed. Believe it.
Do it.
No, I'll let you know if that ever actually becomes a thing. But I would totally do that.
We had when Capcom was out here with Ruben, my wife and I got to help out with India. I can't say what games, but we got to help with them. And Ruben stayed with us for like a week, and we were go places, and people are like, "You look familiar." And he's like, "Yeah." So it was pretty surreal. But yeah, anytime, man. Just let me know.
I will. You joke, but I might take you up on that.
I'm dead serious.
Anyway, my point is, if you're going to make the journey to the mainland for PAX, make it PAX West. It's also closer to you.
Okay, cool.
Although the weather might shock your system.
I used to live in Kirkland, Washington, man.
And fuck, you're all set.
I had to go to Seattle. Where did I go? I had to go to Seattle and to Redmond when I was working for Microsoft. And
of course,
yeah,
Redmond,
it was shocking. That weather, like coming straight from Hawaii, moving there. I was there for like 3 years. God, I thought my fucking toes are gonna fall off. How cold it gets. You
got no offense, but you guys are wusses down there. Like you guys are so used to the best weather on Earth that you're just not ready for reality.
Dude, 70 degrees, we're freezing wearing sweat clothes.
Yeah, here's the thing. I live in Chicago. I grew up here. We're basically cockroaches. We can survive anywhere because we're used to like extreme cold and extreme heat. We have like one nice day a year. And like the rest of the year, it flips on a dime. It will snow and like boil you alive in the same week. You are not ready. You're never ready. And so when you go to any other place, I found that like, fuck, I'm ready to go. Wherever I am, this is pussy weather. I'm set. You know? So, yeah. So I'm like Honolulu, I'm like, whatever. It's nothing. You got that's a big advice to anybody out there. If you haven't traveled and you can, do it because you need exposure to environments outside of the one you're comfortable in.
Yes.
Unless you grow up in Chicago, then you're ready to go.
It's so true, man. It's so true. Like go for it.
So like I went to Atlanta a few years ago, and it doesn't snow down there like ever. Yeah. And I was at this convention for a game called Smite. You know, they brought me down to like check it out, and I was like, okay. And the last day of the convention, like the night before, they sent out this email. They're like, okay, the city of Atlanta is expecting snow tomorrow. We're totally unprepared for this. We're considering shutting down the convention and all this stuff. And it was actually being referred to as snowpocalypse. Now, I know you're from Hawaii, so you probably don't see much snow ever. But when you must have seen it some when you were in Washington. But it basically,
that was it.
At best, did a slight dusting at best. And so, and it was like, okay, that's nothing. And I don't blame their meteorologists for being like, you know, unaware of how much it would or would not snow. What I do blame them for is that all of that city shut down out of fear. Like,
are you serious?
Yo, they shut down like the convention for the last day because they said it was unsafe to go. It's like, dude, it's a 5-minute walk. There's nothing. It's not a big deal. People are staying inside, like barricaded, and like we're gonna die, you know. And like we were trying to, and my friend and I were like, all right, let's go to downtown Atlanta because we didn't think that it was possible you would shut down a major American city over a couple. Like, I can't even describe it as a millimeter of snow. It was nothing. I have photos on my phone somewhere. It's just like mocking it. But we tried to go into downtown Atlanta just to like do something. And we were calling Ubers and there was nobody out in fucking Atlanta to pick us up in Uber. And eventually we got one. And this lady came by and we're just talking about how insane this was. And she's like, tell me about it. I'm from New York. This is ridiculous. Like, this is nothing. So we drive into the city. And I was like, we're walking around. I'm like, now I get why they shot The Walking Dead here. Because there's no people out. All you have to do is tell them it's like a snowstorm and just the city's abandoned. There was nothing open in the middle of the day on a Sunday because they were afraid of snow. I remember some of my friends who actually live down there, and they're like making YouTube videos from inside their house, like, oh, I'm not going out in that. It's like there's nothing out there. You're afraid of air. And I'm not making fun of people from Atlanta. You have a great city. And by the way, if you're ever down in Atlanta, go to Mary Mac's Tea Room. That's the best Southern food I've ever had in my life. But that place, it was just funny. It's like a thing in the South. They're not ready for snow. Just like people in the North, they're not really all that ready for extreme heat or what they perceive to be extreme heat. Except for Chicago. We're fucked up. We're used to everything.
Oh my God.
What?
No, it's true. It's so true.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm sure the same thing would happen in Honolulu. If it snowed slightly, you guys would freak out and lose your shit.
Dude, it's been super windy and raining, like between like 70s and 60s, like early 60s, and they're losing their shit.
You guys. By the way, I think in Celsius. I'm probably the only American that does. I never really figured out Fahrenheit.
Oh man. Oh, okay. So with the amount of with the traveling, with the products you cover, the podcast, with everything that you do, like how often do you run into like burnout or creator's block? How do you overcome it?
Often, because I usually don't have a chance to think about it, because it's like, oh fuck, I need to do this now. I need to do this now. You just kind of do it.
Yeah.
The problem can be all right. So like, I just got through like almost all my backlog. I just powered through December, and I was like, okay, January's right here, and I don't have any obvious plan for it. I'm just going to kind of just let it be. So I haven't really done much with January so far, and that's the closest to it. Is not so much burnout. It's more like I don't even know what to cover, and then I get kind of lazy, and I'm just like, yeah, but TV. So you just end up not doing it. But like I said, I was actually not supposed to be here at all. I was actually supposed to be out in Los Angeles this week. So I appreciate this podcast a lot, actually, because it's kind of forcing me to like get my ass in gear, but and just kind of get back in the seat and do some work. But I really busted my ass in December to get everything done, and so I was just taking a little bit of a break there. But more work always comes. I'm not complaining. Work begets work. You want to keep working.
And that's the thing too. As a content creator, like it's so easy for us to just like, if we stop, then when it's time to get back in gear, it's like, fuck, what do I do?
Yeah. It has to flow organically. That's actually where things like product reviews can be really helpful, because they're like, oh fuck, that's going to force me to think about something and do something.
Right.
So I end up enjoying it.
Oh man. Yeah. There's so much so for me, like I recently, as of September last year, I actually quit my full-time job. I was working as a senior systems analyst at a hospital out here to do this full-time. And the transition, like I keep telling people, they're like, oh, you must be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And I'm like, I went from $100,000 a year position to scraps. But at least I'm not working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. I'm on call 24/7, or I'm at a point where every time I pull up to a stoplight, I'm passing out. I'm like, there's, they're downs. Yeah, I'm not making not even a fraction of a percentage of a quarter of a, incumbent of what I was making, but I am a lot happier.
Yeah, influencer life at our level is more fun.
Yeah.
But it is not very financially rewarding. It's very gig based a lot of the time. And you're just kind of hopping from that to that and hoping your luck doesn't run out.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak for myself in that case. I'm assuming it's somewhat similar for you. But because I don't know about you, but I personally don't have the type of views to justify like, oh, cool, I can retire now. Like, sure as hell, this is not the case. Could I make more money if I like quit and got a quote unquote real job at some major company? Yeah. But would I enjoy it? Probably not.
Right.
As long as I can continue to eke out a living doing this, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I'm at too. Like I love this, being able to, and it's one of the things, like I was telling, some friends and some family, like, oh, but what's the motivating factor for you to keep doing this? I'm like, I actually get to spend time with my wife. Like when I was working at the hospital for years, the only time I actually ever saw my wife was when I'm getting up to go to work and she's asleep, or I'm coming home and she's going to work. That was it. Our days never lapped over. Now I see her every day. She's probably fucking sick of me. And she's sitting across from me, like looking at ice cream cones and giving me dirty looks. But, at least now I'm like, yeah, I get to spend time with her. If we have kids, I get to spend time with our kids, whenever we have them. It's just one of those things, like, I don't think people understand when you have that ability to work for yourself, and it's not at all easy, but when you have the opportunity to do it and do what you want and you love what you do, sometimes you can't put a monetary value on that,
I agree completely. I mean, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying before, but people bitching at you for making money doing this. It's like, you're doing this. My central motivation for doing this job is not the paycheck. As I keep saying, that's a necessity of the society we created for ourselves. You need the little paper rectangles to exist. I do this because if in a perfect world where I had all the money I ever needed, or we just didn't need money, I would do this anyway because I enjoy it. Yeah. And somehow that makes me scum as opposed to someone who's like, yeah, man, I only work at Walmart because I need a paycheck. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We what do they call us? They call us e-beggars.
E-beggars. Even though I've literally never once emailed somebody and been like, take me to this, give me the thing, give me the money. It's like they reach out to me and I say yes or no.
Yeah.
If I actually want to cover something I was not asked to do, I will contact them and say, like, would you be interested? And they say no, you move on. You say yes, perfect. But I'm like, give me the thing. I'm entitled. I have a channel. I've never done that shit. It's not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing too. Some people are like, oh, how are you going to retire? Do you have a 401k? Do you like someone told me this. They're like, if you have a real job, there's a guarantee, like you at least have a guaranteed paycheck. I said, oh, really? So if you have a job at a company, which all companies are pretty much at will employment, you're guaranteed. What if they decide, I'm going to downsize? You're SOL.
Yeah, apparently this person who said this to you has never heard of the concept of being fired.
Right?
I mean, children have heard of that.
Right?
There's a Rugrats episode about it. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just, we love what we do. It's a passion. It's not really about the paycheck. I mean, it's nice when we get paid or we get sent to events, but even if we didn't, we do it because we love it.
Yeah. The thing is, job security is rare in pretty much any field. It's not a very common thing. You just feel like it's more secure as long as you don't screw up. But guess what? That's how we feel too.
Yeah. Oh man. Winding down to the last two questions. What are some projects that you have in the works currently that you are allowed to share, like barring any NDA?
I don't. Yeah, that's a tough one. There's one really exciting one, but I can't talk about it. Yeah. Like I said, I kind of completed most of my stuff through December, and this was supposed to be kind of my downtime. So I have no immediate short-term projects on the way, but I've got, let's just say, longer-term stuff that I'm super excited about, and I can't wait to announce. But I'm not at this point in time allowed to do so. But it will be while I have every intention of continuing to do YouTube, there's going to be a new little trick in my hat of a new thing that I'm going to be doing that I think will be pretty fucking cool.
You mean you're not worried about, Kappa and the adpocalypse and
not in the slightest.
Like, oh, YouTube, it's over.
Yeah, again, that's extremism based on ignorance. If those statements were true about, like, yeah, man, if you make a video, you get fined $42,000 no matter what the video is, like, oh my God, if that was actually true, yes, we'd all be freaking out. But I got news for you. That shit ain't true.
Really. And doesn't it amaze you how many people actually don't take the time to research stuff?
Oh, it's stunning. It's beyond stunning.
Oh, God. Dude, you and I have stories. I feel like we could just keep sitting
we
here.
Could forever, but we start getting into broken NDA territory. Right. But yeah, at least we agree on that shit. So if you're out there and you're like, I don't want to make videos because of $42,000, that's not a thing. You're not gonna have that problem. You'll be fine.
Exactly.
Just don't make like really obviously like, I don't even want to say the terminology, but videos aimed at children in a very negative way, and you'll be fine. Yeah. It's really only like that rule's in place for like really extreme people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
All
for
right.
somebody who's like, hey guys, I bought a new action figure. Find him $42,000. He's trying to appeal to children.
Right.
It's not how it works. It's not how it works.
Oh man. Okay. So last question I have for you is what advice, if we summed everything up that we've been talking about and your own experience over the last decade, what advice would you give to the fans, your fans, fans of the podcast and the audience here that would love to get into working either with the gaming industry or would like to get into podcasting or just, to what we're doing? What advice would you give them?
Make honest content, be yourself, stick to the content, be consistent, and don't be overly negative for no apparent reason. News for views is a quick fix formula that does not last. Channels come, channels go, and you can gain a big following by appealing to that, but it will taper off because your fan base is more dedicated to you as a news source as opposed to you as a personality. Yeah. Say yes to interesting opportunities, even if they're not offering you the best thing. If they're like, hey man, we'll stick you on a plane and put you up for a night, but you got to fly across the country, do the thing and come back a few hours later, you say yes, because it opens doors. Open as many doors as you can and you'll see what sticks and what works. Don't try. You're not at a position where you can sit there and just negotiate a ton of terms for yourself, most likely. And you might feel you're entitled to it, but I got news for you. You're not.
Yeah. And I lied. I have one final question for you.
Shoot.
Did you have fun?
On what?
On this podcast.
I'm
on
just
this interview.
Sarcastic. Yes.
Oh, did it feel like a Q&A thing or did it feel like a organic?
It felt like a conversation.
Yeah.
How was it for you? Was I too loud and obnoxious?
No, dude, I was nervous as shit.
Why?
One, you're Adam Koralik. Two,
no, I'm told you I'm not Sandler. You got the wrong guy.
Two.
By the way, I don't really like Adam Sandler all that much. It's just the obvious celebrity go-to because he has the same first name as me. He's made a bunch of fucking horrible movies. Yes. He's got one good one right now, and before that, it was like Billy Madison.
That's very, very true.
Come at me, Sandler. No, please don't. You could kill the show.
No, some people would be like, "What about The Longest Yard?" No.
I actually enjoyed The Longest Yard, but it's just if you like it in that it's the sports movie predictable as shit formula. Sure, that's a shut your brain off movie. Nothing about it is creative.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I was nervous because I'm a fan of your work over the years. I was nervous. I was like, man, I don't want to fuck this up. I haven't done a podcast in 2 months. Oh my God, what do I do? And for the audience who's unaware, we were actually supposed to do this a couple weeks ago, but I was having a lot of issues. So the day we were supposed to record, I had issues with my mic went down, my Go XLR went down. I was like, fuck. Okay. I'm like, can we reschedule? I was so nervous you're going to be like, no, fuck you. Because I've had that happen before. Mm-hmm. Had to happen. And I was like, oh shit. I feel you never want to make a bad impression. But I'm so glad that you were able to reschedule. We were able to do this. And this is actually a lot sooner than I was thinking we were going to do it at the end of the month, but we made it happen first week.
I got news for you, which I'm sure you figured out as we've been going, as well as anybody listening out there. I ain't shit. So don't be afraid of that. Approach me at conventions. I'll talk to you. I don't care. I'm a dude. Dude, I'm a dude who talks about stuff I own. That's not a reason to be popular. It's just that's nothing. Like, I appreciate it, but that's nothing. I appreciate it though. As for the scheduling, I do remember that because you had issues and I was like, all right, cool, we'll do it whenever. And then I think I vaguely recall that I was like, are you available tomorrow? And you're like, yes. And I was like, all right, we're all set. And then I realized I was flying to Guam tomorrow. I was like, oh fuck, I can't do it. Sorry. And then I came back and it was like, okay, now I guess I'm available. It's cool. Let's do it. It's not a big deal.
Honestly, it really is an honor to have you on the show. Man, it's especially kicking off the new year.
Happy to do it. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, definitely. And again, for the audience, tell them where they can find you. And I'll also leave links in the description of the podcast.
Yeah, it's just my name, Adam Koralik. Look it up on all the socials, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that shit.
Awesome. And people, you can catch this. See, this is where my No, my stuttering comes in because I get nervous when I'm closing out my show. I don't know why.
Why would you get nervous at closing out the show?
I don't know. It's such a weird fucking thing.
It's like, do you feel like you have a pre-set routine that if you fuck it up, it goes wrong?
Yes.
Then you fuck it up, so it always goes wrong. That becomes part of the formula. Then you're stuck with that forever.
Yes.
That's your identity. Work on that shit.
Right?
Now you have a reason to be nervous. Go ahead.
Right? Okay. So people, you can catch the Kasanova podcast on all major podcast outlets: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Pandora, YouTube, and other podcasting outlets. I just read all that off of what's in front of me too, because I forget. So
yeah, I was gonna say, like, you are a podcast whore, man. Like, you're all over the place.
Of course, gotta spread the love everywhere.
Very, very much so. Spread it wide open.
Right? No shame. And with that being said, people, this is Adam and we are signing out. Everyone, have a good one.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.
Hey, did you enjoy this episode of the Kasanova podcast? Well, I'm sure you did. And since you did, and you're wondering where else you can find it on every podcasting outlet. Yes, that includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Launchpad DM by Podcast One, and so much more. And the only thing I ask of you is if you truly enjoyed it, even if you didn't enjoy it, please leave a rating and tell us what you thought of it, what you like, what you didn't like, and everything in between. And also, if you're looking for video formats of this podcast and many more, you'll be able to find them on youtube.com/Mekel Kasanova, as well as on twitch.tv/Mekel Kasanova, and new episodes every single Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, that being said, this is Mekel Kasanova, Hawaii's favorite YouTuber. I am signing out. You guys have a great one.